Well, Andrew Lloyd Webber's music for World Cup Grandstand is now available on a BBC record.
Tomorrow night, BBC1 joins a gala dinner with the Variety Club of Great Britain in honour of 60 years of broadcasting by the BBC. Cliff Mitchellmore introduces guests including Sir Robin Day, Brian Johnston, Andre Previn and George Howard. A celebration of 60 years live from London tomorrow at 9:25.
Well, in 15 minutes, the first of a series of 6 inscrutable investigations for the Chinese detective. That's in 15 minutes, but first we have the news from Jan Leeming.
Canberra and the Marines are home. 2,000 Royal Marine Commandos back from the Falklands fighting were given an emotional welcome when the liner-turned-troopship sailed into Southampton this morning. Thousands of relatives and friends were on the quayside, and Prince Charles flew out to the ship by helicopter to greet the Marines personally. It's 3 months since Canberra left Southampton laden with troops for the Falklands, where she survived waves of Argentine air attacks during the San Carlos landings. Peter Main reports on today's jubilant welcome home for the ship, her troops and crew.
The Great White Whale, that's what the troops on the Falklands christened the Canberra. And as the 45,000-ton cruise liner turned troopship steamed towards our home port, accompanied by an armada of vessels of all shapes and sizes, it was easy to see why. On the quayside, families and well-wishers strained for that first glimpse of their husband, son or friend. Canberra took the Marines to the Falklands 3 long months ago. She took them right into San Carlos Bay, where the Argentines tried to bomb her. But Canberra survived that and many other problems on her epic 27,000-mile voyage. The Prince of Wales flew out to the Canberra to welcome her home, piloting the Wessex helicopter himself. As the vessel neared her berth, Lynx helicopters of the Army Air Corps display team flew past in salute, the port firefighting ship adding her welcome. 2 of the 14 women who sailed with the liner to and from the Falklands. Part of the 400 P&O crew volunteered to face danger and were now back home. As the excitement mounted, the whole occasion took on a carnival air, with more than a touch of the last night of the proms thrown in. John Humphreys flew out to the Canberra and was on board as she docked.
It's an absolutely remarkable sight. From here, it looks absolutely wonderful, and the men on board just can't believe it's happening. They keep wandering around and saying, it's unbelievable, it's unbelievable. Somebody just said, it's better than winning the World Cup. I've actually got with me Brigadier Julian Thompson. Brigadier, I don't know whether you'd agree with the World Cup thing, but what do you make of it all?
It's absolutely fantastic. I was struck, absolutely dumb by it. It is amazing. I've never seen so many boats and so many people. It is unbelievable, actually. It's rather tear-jerking, I'm afraid.
Well, you look a little bit taken aback by it all, I must say.
Absolutely. I'm in shock, emotional shock or something.
And this from a man who's just gone through the whole Falklands campaign.
Yes, well, one tends to think of those who aren't here sometimes. So it's fantastic, actually. Quite amazing.
Altogether, 237 British servicemen died in the Falklands. The Argentines lost 3 times as many. Canberra's captain, Dennis Scott Masson, was with his vessel throughout the 92-day voyage and was now clearly delighted to be back. And he watched as Brigadier Thompson led the first of the Marines down the gangway. The quayside soon became a sea of green berets as the men made their way to the dock sheds where they were reunited with their families in private. The youngest Marine to serve in the Falklands, 17-year-old Martin Tate, was one of the first there. The men yomped across the Falklands, carrying packs heavier than these, and they paid tribute to their recent enemies.
We're 4-5, we took the 2 sisters, and we were under the impression that there were Argentinian Marines on there.
They were really tough fighters, were they?
Well, they've got a good strap on. They got some good equipment, and if they'd had a bit more bottle, we might have had a bit of a better fight.
The only civilian to make the voyage was Jack Abbott, who explained how he managed it.
Come on.
Well, I was some help to the troops.
You're being a bit cagey about that. Did you mean you chatted them up?
No, I looked after them. My house was full of paratroopers, the colonel down. So I had a wonderful crowd in my house.
Disembarkation took several hours, the Marines being ferried to their bases at Plymouth and Arbroath in a special fleet of buses. As for the Canberra, she's now going to have a 6-week refit, which will cost between £7 and £8 million. P&O say she should be back in service as a luxury cruise liner in September.
It's reported tonight from the Falklands that there was an air raid alert last night when an unidentified aircraft flew into the exclusion zone. The plane apparently disappeared from radar screens 15 minutes later, but it seems that while the alert lasted, people in Stanley were told to switch off their lights and some were sent home from work. An all clear is said to have been broadcast over Falklands radio, but the Defence Ministry in London say at the moment they have no information on the incident. Rail services have again been badly hit by the train drivers' strike. There were no trains at all on Western Region or in and out of Euston Station. Our Labour Relations correspondent Martin Aidney says a major return by drivers tomorrow isn't likely. The train drivers' leader, Ray Buckton, called a news conference to say there'd be no end to the strike unless British Rail changed its dictatorial attitude. What message did he have for people hoping to travel?
I'm actually saying to the travelling public, I'm sorry that British Railways Board's only looking for 5,000 people to go to work tomorrow. We're looking for 26,000 locomotive men to drive the trains and get them running. So I'm saying to British Railways Board, if you will undo the wrong you did, and you will suspend those rosters, then those 26,000 people those 26,000 drivers could be at work. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, the next couple of days will be make or break for this rail strike, and today a very defiant no surrender from Mr. Ray Buckton here at the ASLEF headquarters. He's clearly been encouraged by the weekend support from Mr. Michael Foot, the leader of the Labour Party. And today, like his officials, he's been at a meeting of ASLEF drivers which continue to support his stand. For British Rail, unless they can get a service running in the next couple of days, very much better than what they've managed over the past week, they look like having to make very serious decisions on Tuesday to lay off staff and maybe to dismiss ASLEF strikers. And if that were to happen, it'll plunge this dispute into new levels of bitterness and difficulty.
Fighting in Beirut has reached a new intensity with the heaviest shelling so far by the Israelis. Earlier in the day, the Israeli cabinet was reported to have studied military options to force Palestinian guerrillas out of the city. Officials said afterwards that the prolonged peace talks were seen as a PLO attempt to buy time. In Beirut, 21 Israeli soldiers were wounded in today's fighting. One of their camps sustained a direct hit during a PLO rocket attack, but the Israelis themselves have carried on pounding targets. Bill Hamilton reporting.
This has now become something of a familiar sight in West Beirut, but for the 200,000 people still living here, each day brings another frightening chapter in the war of nerves. At any time of the day or night, another barrage of Israeli and Palestinian gunfire suddenly opens up, sending innocent civilians running for shelter. Despite the enormous strength of the Israeli presence, the PLO show no signs of ending their resistance.
All the talk over the past few days has centered on hopes that a compromise might be reached. The reality here in West Beirut is something quite different. The artillery fire continues, the exchanges are becoming more frequent, and now Syria's refusal to accept the 6,000-strong PLO force makes an acceptable end to this siege seem as far off as ever.
But the suffering caused by this war of attrition has now spread way beyond the bounds of West Beirut. Families desperate to escape Palestinian rocket and artillery fire are fleeing underground. An anxious father led us 30 feet below this building still under construction. We descended 2 flights of stairs in total darkness to reach an underground car park which has now become home for 3 of his daughters hit by shrapnel from an exploding shell. They're not the only young casualties of this conflict who've settled for a dismal, though safer existence underground. The longer the siege of Beirut continues, the greater the misery for those for whom there is no reprieve.
The Israeli shelling of West Beirut has angered many diplomats still working in the city. At least 7 embassies have been damaged, as well as a number of buildings which have no apparent connection with either side. Christopher Morris saw the effects of an earlier bombardment.
The Israeli blitz along West Beirut's seafront lasted 9 hours. PLO strongholds were supposed to have been the targets. These were simply holiday apartments. Serious questions are now being asked here about the intention and accuracy of Israel's shelling. Neither this holiday hotel nor the tourist shopping centre could be considered as legitimate military targets. Certainly not the Algerian embassy, severely damaged in what seems to have been indiscriminate shelling by the Israelis, impatient to destroy the trapped guerrillas as negotiations drag on. This missile, a cluster bomb, hit the embassy after being fired from an Israeli gunboat just offshore. It was a direct hit, the inside of the building practically destroyed. There's no doubt that Israel's repeated shelling is overshadowing the optimism of a negotiated settlement of the crisis. The fact that 7 foreign embassies, including that of the Soviet Union, have now been badly damaged by Israeli shells has only made matters worse.
Beirut Radio said tonight that yet another ceasefire had been agreed and was due to take effect an hour ago. So far, it's not been observed. Search is still going on among wreckage of the Boeing 727 which crashed at New Orleans on Friday, killing 152 people. 8 people are still in hospital, among them 16-month-old Melissa Trahan, who was dragged from the rubble of her home.
There's a kid alive. You got a kid alive over there. What? A kid is alive over there.
Noticed like the mattress and the carpet went up and down. At first I thought it was an illusion. And I looked again, and I yelled to him, I said, give me a hand, I have something moving under here. Then we grabbed the rubble and we pulled it back, and there was a little girl on the stomach trying to push up, trying to get up. And I said, she's alive, it's a baby. I said, get me a doctor.
Little Melissa is now recovering from serious burns. Searchers have found the aircraft's flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder. It's hoped they'll explain the cause of the crash. Experts now say it wasn't lightning as they thought at first. And that's all from me for this weekend. Good night.
We'll now look at the weather. In most parts of the country, we'll have a dry, bright day tomorrow with some sunshine, making it quite warm. Southwest England may have a shower from time to time, and late in the day, there could be a shower in other southern counties.
Now with news of tomorrow's panorama, here's David Lomax.
For a month now, Israeli forces have been poised above West Beirut. Down below, under the bombardment, people are dying.
No more blood. It's enough like this, blood. It's enough like this.
Thousands of civilians have already fled from their homes, but the Palestinian fighters still won't move. If diplomatic efforts to persuade them fail, the Israelis are determined to throw them out.
If you could make it a parallel of a cancer operation, you might have to take a little bit out. It might hurt a bit, but in the long run, you might save a country's life.
People caught in this conflict live under the constant threat of death.
I hate Israel. I hate.
A Panorama team has just returned from 3 weeks inside West Beirut. Our report, Fighting for Survival, is on Panorama tomorrow at 8:10.
The Money programme, special on BBC2 shortly, Reds in the Red, looks at the economic crisis facing some of the communist countries with almost all credit from the West now cut off. For our next programme here on BBC1, there are CFAC subtitles on page 170 for those viewers with hearing difficulty. David Yip stars as the Chinese detective in the first of a series of 6 investigations.